Hello everyone, and welcome to your first tutorial in Illustrator. This tutorial is going to cover setting up your workspace, which is going to be useful for all of your next tutorials. We're also going to start with setting up a new document. So let's go ahead and start with that. So I've opened up Illustrator. Right now I can toggle between recent files and Creative Cloud files. But right now I'm just going to hit Create New. Now you'll notice at the top of your new document dialog box that we can choose between recent formats that we've used, saved formats, mobile, web, print, film, and video. Many of these you will have the opportunity to use throughout your time in the Southern Miss design program, including film and video, which you'll use often in your motion graphics courses, print, which you're going to use in the bulk of your courses, web in both Interactive Design 1 and Interactive Design 2, and mobile you will also be using in Interactive Design 1 and Interactive Design 2. To your right, you'll see that we'll have the option to name our document. This document is going to be named Workspace. And you'll notice that we'll have the option of changing the width and the height, as well as the units of measurement. For this document and most of your documents, we're going to go ahead and use inches. We can also set up bleeds as well as advanced options such as color mode, raster effects, preview mode. In your Photoshop courses, you should have been taught about color spectrum, such as CMYK and RGB. This will be a print document, so it is set up for CMYK. I'm going to hit Create. The first thing that I would like you to notice in this workspace is that this workspace is titled. If we look to our top left, we can see that it says Cotton Default. If I go to my drop-down menu and under Window, there's an area for Workspace, which shows us all of the workspaces that we either have created or the default workspaces that come with Illustrator. We can also hit New Workspace in order to save a workspace, which is what you will need to do whenever you have finished setting up your workspace. Once again, it is crucial that you set up your workspace to be like this. This will make helping you in class easier, as well as working on future tutorials easier. So the first thing I'd like you to notice is that our toolbar is to the left and our palettes are to the right. In the middle here, I have what I call tool drawers. These can be pulled out of our toolbar, and this is commonly done whenever there is a set of tools that we will need to have access to quite often. In our workspace, our corners are going to be the most frequently visited spots. So on our toolbar, we're going to see that our selection tool and our direct selection tool and our color are going to be the areas that we are going to most frequently use. In our palettes, we'll see that color and align and pathfinder are going to be the most frequently used. Now your palettes may not currently look like this. Alright, and that is what we're going to cover now. So each palette can be detached, can be minimized and increased in size, and we can even shrink them down to icons. Normally I work with mine in icon modes, but for the sake of your tutorials, I'm going to have those able to be read so that you'll know where I'm clicking. Whenever a palette is moved closer to another palette, they can either be combined with or connected to the top or bottom. It's important that you put your palettes in this order as well, So that way during class, if there is an issue and you cannot find a palette, I can simply say your brushes are located just above your stroke palette, or that your layers palette is located just below your transparency palette. At the top of our screen, we're going to see the properties for whatever tool we have selected. If we do not have a tool selected, it's going to default to whatever the last tool was. So, covering the tools. The first tool that we have here is the selection tool. This is used for resizing, rotating, and moving objects. The direct selection tool is used for directly selecting within certain objects. Magic Wand tool and the lasso tool are also selection tools. We will very rarely use the Magic Wand tool, and on occasion we may use the lasso tool. Next we have the pen tool. This is one of the most frequently used items in Illustrator, and all of the pen tools will be needed at some point, and so having access to those is crucial. Next we have the curvature pen tool, which we are not going to use that often, but in some cases it can speed things up. Next we have the type tool. As you're probably learning in your typography class, type is used in 99.9% of all designs, and so having access to your type tools at all times is important, and so that drawer has also been pulled out. Next we have the line segment tool. Then we have the rectangle tool, the paintbrush tool, the shaper tool, the scissors tool, the rotate tool, scale tool, width tool, puppet warp tool, which is very similar to the puppet warp found in Photoshop, the shape builder tool, the perspective grid tool, mesh, gradient, eyedropper, blend, symbol sprayer, column graph, artboard, slice, hand, and zoom. Now not all of these are going to be used often, but at some point in time you're probably going to use at least one of these. Below our tools we have our color. Now our color has two options, color for the fill and color for the stroke. Every shape that is created in Illustrator has the option to have both a fill and stroke. To the bottom left of that we have the default setting, which it's currently at, which is white and black. To the top right we can swap those colors. Beneath that we see that we have three icons. The first icon is the last used fill color, gradient, and none. It's important to note that there is a none swatch. Many students, especially new students, think that making something white means none. However, white is a value. The palettes that we're going to be using most start with color, which normally brings us to our color spectrum. If your color palette does not look this way, in the top right corner you're going to find the options panel. If we click that, we can see that we can toggle between spectrums, or we can hide options. Beneath color is swatches. Now one of the things that you've learned in your InDesign course is that you're going to have the ability to access PMS swatches as well as use saved swatches. That applies here in Illustrator as well. And just like with color, we have an options button here where we can open our swatch library. And in that swatch library, we will find our color books where we can find access to those Pantone colors. Next, we have the gradient palette. And in the gradient palette, we have the ability to choose between linear and radial gradient. And then we have our gradient bar, which allows us to determine the colors that are going to gradate. Now, in later tutorials, we're going to go much further into the gradient palette. Next, we have the symbols palette. Symbols are great for saving our progress, and if we are working in something that has a lot of parts that we might want to have access to for later files, once this file is saved, these symbols can be accessed by other AI files. That also applies for brushes. Throughout this Illustrator course, we are going to be using custom-made brushes. And so by creating a file for custom brushes, we can save that file, and then we can go to Open Brush Library, Other Library, and open up a file of brushes. Next, we have the stroke palette, which is also going to be used quite heavily, and we're going to be using a lot in our next tutorial. Next, we have transparency, which deals with the opacity of certain objects. Next, we have layers, which we're going to rarely use in Illustrator, and we will discuss them further. Then we have our appearance palette, which is very useful for whenever an effect is applied to an object. This allows us to see what effect has been applied and to edit that effect. Next, we have the image trace palette. We are going to spend an entire tutorial covering the image trace palette, how to use the image trace palette, and when not to use the image trace palette. Beneath that, we have our type palettes, which are character, open type, and paragraph. Our character palette allows us to choose the typeface that we want to design with. Open type allows us to use some of the open type features that may be found in the open type typeface. And lastly, we have the paragraph, which is fairly standard. Most of you who have experience with any word processing software knows how to use the paragraph functions. And then lastly, we have the align palette, which allows us to align objects to each other by going to the align to align to selection or align to artboard. And then lastly, we have the Pathfinder palette, which we're going to spend a great deal on in a future tutorial. Now, another thing that we like to have open in our workspace is rulers. If we go to View, Rulers, and Show Rulers, or Command R, which is the shortcut key for that, we'll see that we have a ruler that helps us determine our height and our width. And in our rulers, we can also click and drag and create a guide. So something for us to align things to. And we can make as many of these as we'd like. In many cases, we can even select a guide and move it if it's not quite where we want it. If you're unable to move your guides, simply go to View, Guides, and you can unlock guides. Or you can have the option of clearing guides, which will erase them all. So this right here is going to complete your Workspace tutorial. As mentioned in the beginning, please go to Window, Workspace, New Workspace, title it and press OK. This is going to save your workspace and allow you to have this workspace for all of your tutorials moving forward. Thank you guys. I'll see you in the next tutorial.